Hello and welcome back to the Americano Show. Today I am delighted to be joined by Ben Clerkin, who is our US online editor. And Ben wrote a piece overnight, last night, Sunday to Monday, for the US website. It's also on the UK website if you want to read it. The headline of which was, "Facts, unlike opinions, are hard to come by in Minneapolis." And this is because, of course, a 37-year-old male nurse called Alex Pretty was killed in the street on Saturday in Minneapolis, just 2 weeks after a mother of three, Renee Good, was also shot in her car. And the scenes from Minneapolis, as we discussed in another podcast last week, are becoming increasingly fraught. Ben, as you say, facts are hard to come by, but many people this weekend have spent quite a large amount of time analysing the horrific video of this shooting, trying to figure out if Pretty, who was armed, whether his gun was a factor in the shooting, what actually happened. And as you say in the piece, the truth is nobody really knows.
It's impossible to know, really. On the one hand, you've got a guy who turns up to a scene and entangles himself with law enforcement, and he's armed. There's a struggle. We don't know if they genuinely feared for their lives. They would claim, obviously, they did. On the other hand, you have some pretty awful-looking video and stills of what looks like an execution. And that's really what is staying with people and swaying the public debate here. There is no court case. In a court case, maybe the police officer, the border immigration officer would get up and say, well, look, someone shout, we don't know what happened fundamentally, but he would perhaps make a great defense of his actions. We may be persuaded by those. But at the moment, what we're seeing is certainly what looks awful. And there may probably never be a court case. We may never really know the truth of this matter. But the truth, as people tend to understand it at the moment in America, is that there is an execution on the streets of Minneapolis. And I think that is unlike last time with Renee Good, the mother who drove towards at least an ICE officer. This feels as if the majority of the country are really pretty horrified by this. And you can see it as well in the way that the press is reporting it. Usually quite sympathetic outlets are really putting their punches over this. And for instance, the New York Post this morning encouraging Trump to, I think, pull out actually of Minneapolis. Certainly dial it down, which is very different to any other instance of this nature.
And Trump himself, while being fairly forthright in certain ways about this, he posted the picture of the gun that Alex Pretty was carrying, and he called ICE officers brave patriots and all that. He has sounded a little bit more circumspect than some of his senior team, who immediately weighed in on social media to suggest that Pretty was acting very, very dangerously. And also interesting, it's not just individuals, it's the actual departments and their social media handles that are being very forthright. The Department of Homeland Security, for instance, said that Pretty was setting out to do maximum harm to ICE officers and Border Patrol officers. I think anybody watching that video would struggle to, any fair-minded person would struggle to come to that conclusion if you just see that video.
I mean, it makes the American public, I think, lose faith in those institutions and those people, because clearly what they were describing was not what any of us were seeing. And I think that message has come home now to Trump, because, yes, last night he pivoted into the Wall Street Journal, in which he talked about, I mean, obviously, initially when this happened, he and his team, as you say, were very gung-ho. But last night pivoted, said he's thinking about, he's hinted that he was thinking about pulling troops, not quite yet. He's thinking about pulling the ICE agents out. And he's thinking about pulling the ICE agents out. And he also has not come to an assessment on whether on the killing of Mr. Pretty as well. That's under review, which is very different to what Kristi Noem said and the rest of his administration said within like seconds of this happening. Noem was sort of saying Pretty had gone there to cause maximum amount of chaos and violence. And, you can look at the guy and sort of say, well, maybe she's been loitering with a gun and causing a fuss and all the rest of it, but he certainly wasn't doing that. So the one thing is that Trump does seem to be responsive. And this morning he has sent Tom Homan, the borders are down. He seems to Minneapolis to take control of the situation, which clearly undercuts Kristi Noem and the policy to date. Very significant sort of changes there, I think, today.
And that points towards a very interesting tension that we seem to be understanding, or we are understanding now, is emerging at the highest levels of the Homeland domestic security agenda as regards immigration, which is that Tom Homan, the immigration czar, big, tough, burly guy who was very popular with Trump and sort of Trumpists in the first phase of the administration, he seems to have been pushed out a little bit in recent months. And Kristi Noem, who's Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, working with, it seems, Corey Lewandowski, a longtime Trump acolyte, they were very much in opposition, it seems, to Tom Homan and his deportation agenda. And they, if reporting is to be believed, were pushing for these public confrontations because they thought that reinforced the message. The more videos you can have of ICE agents being shouted at by angry protesters, the better, because it shows exactly what they're trying to do and the resistance that they're up against. Is that your understanding?
Absolutely. And I think Tom Homan has been, well, that's, too early to say, but it appears that he's been vindicated here. I mean, when you look at Renee Good, the mother who was shot, the driver who was shot by the ICE officer, Tom came out. His comment was in contrast to the rest of the administration. He said, let's let the investigation play out. Then I think a lot of pressure was put onto him. And he said, well, no, look, this looks like a justified shooting. I think it's of note that in this instance as well, I haven't seen him comment yet on this, which is obviously entirely appropriate. So I think that strategy, that approach of his is now being appreciated in the White House. It bodes ill for, obviously, Kristi Noem and her team. But it also, it points really to the midterms, and it points also to this funding bill at the end of the week, which might shut down the government. I think Trump recognises he's losing so much here. He's losing the argument. He's losing the country, and he may end up losing power. If and when the midterms go badly for him. And this really is immigration, clearly massive. It's the issue that the Republican Party owns, except the polling at the moment shows that underwater on immigration, and this is sounding huge alarm bells for everybody, I think.
And it's interesting that there is going to be this fight this week on Capitol Hill over ICE funding, because one of the elements of this story at the moment is that a lot of the ICE officers who are patrolling the streets don't seem to be particularly well trained. Some of them have been quite hastily trained. Some of them are on quite large salaries. And there is a lot of suspicion that it's actually being done in a fairly amateurish way, when what's needed is a highly professionalized law enforcement operation.
Yeah, and I think no expert on these matters, but from the interviews and people that I've spoken to, it seems to me that the job that ICE are being required to do in Minneapolis at the moment is really not the job that many of these officers have been trained to do. As you say, going out in these numbers, a public spectacle, this is a real problem for them to just simply do their job. So they're not really trained for it. It's going badly. And I think there's another element there, which is with the Border Patrol, because Border Patrol are obviously working with ICE here. And I know there are tensions within the Border Patrol because they feel that their reputation is somewhat being tarnished by these operations, and this is a reputational thing which is going to last for a long time. ICE in America, divisive for a long time. I think Border Patrol much less so, and I think there's a great fear that they're going to be demonized, and that's going to have problems. When the next administration comes in.
And one of the key factors in this story that is underappreciated from people who are outside America at the moment is the weather. I believe you are currently snowed in New York. In Minnesota and Minneapolis, I think it's minus 24 at the moment. This is an extraordinary factor that is actually stopping the protests and the unrest getting out of hand. Business owners in Minneapolis at the moment are actually grateful that it's so freezing cold, because it's stopping what we saw in 2020 in Minneapolis, the Black Lives Matter protest, which is widespread anarchy and unrest, because it's simply too cold for protesters to spend a long time outside.
Exactly. I mean, they're pretty tough people up there, but no one wants to go out. I mean, it's quite clear. You see this. I mean, as you say, summer of 2020, weather was a huge factor. I mean, we saw it in London, didn't we, with the London riots all those years ago? It was a hot summer, and guess what? You might say it is slightly being facilitated up there as well. The schools, as I understand, are still closed down because they feel the children are going to be traumatized. The schools are still closed down. Actually, maybe that keeps the parents at home. But the schools are being closed down. I think people are being time off work. There's a sense of sort of mourning, I think, within the city, but also of idle hands. So it's a difficult. We've got another piece today, obviously from Jenna Stocker on the website, her view of a conservative in Minneapolis. We've really talked to that. It's a difficult place to be, I think, right now.
And you talked about the midterms, which are, of course, very much on Trump's mind and his team's mind. Going back to 2020, I think it's fair to say that the Black Lives Matter riots played a part in Trump's defeat to Joe Biden that year in the presidential election. And a lot of Republicans feel that where Trump went wrong was that he was talking a lot about it on social media. He was sounding tough on social media, but he didn't actually deploy the National Guard when he should have done. And that meant that there was a sense of disorder in the cities. It added to this Trump exhaustion, Trump fatigue, which didn't help him at the ballot. This year, they seem to be determined not to make that same mistake again. And yet there is a widespread sense of disorder. And the public will support the use of force in law enforcement if they think it is just and if they think it helps restore order. At the moment, even in these freezing conditions, it doesn't seem to be doing that. If the weather warms up and they don't get a grip on the situation in Minneapolis and certain other cities, and it might spread, this is going to be a serious threat to the rest of his presidency, because if he loses the House and the Senate, we know exactly what's coming. That's endless impeachments of Donald Trump, endless congressional restrictions on what Trump can do.
Yeah, exactly. I think he is now reconsidering the whole effort. He's reconsidering, it turns out, deploying ICE agents and these kind of operations in other cities. They were going to target blue cities. Now that's all up in the air again. It's difficult to know how he's going to play this, and I think you've got a lot of powerful Republicans, James Comer, who are really asking him to dial it down here, and I think probably that's going to happen.
Well, again, speaking about businesses in Minneapolis, they're appealing for both sides, i.e. the Democrats and the Republicans, to come together to try and calm the situation down. And it's interesting that they're doing that, because not only Trump's getting in a lot of trouble for being the problem here, but Republicans are right to point out that Democratic leaders, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, who was not going to run again, they are going out on the streets and encouraging citizens to protest and to cause trouble. And that is obviously a significant factor here.
Yeah, it's such a toxic mix, isn't it? But politically difficult to play, because clearly you've got the people like Walz, as you say, and Jacob Frey, Walz, who yesterday likened the struggle of the people of Minnesota to the Holocaust, basically. So he's not helping. He's not helping at all. Really stoking up tensions in the city, which kind of feels. There's also a lot of. I mean, the reason that they're there in the first place is obviously immigration, but is also to root out a lot of the Somali benefit fraud as well. There's some clear problems in that city which need addressing. However, it is just going to take a delicate touch, I think, or a more delicate touch, because you have these clear problems that need addressing. You have the Democrats who are being, the Department of Justice are looking into the mayor and the governor at the moment, because they may be obstructive or even encouraging this kind of violence. And so it's very tempting, I would imagine, for Donald Trump to go all guns blazing into that situation, but that really isn't working. And where we are now is not the summer of 2020 when things were on fire. People was, you kind of, as you say, people remember the summer of 2020 and how the National Guard was not deployed and what a miss that was. But it's not the same situation. And were you to deploy the National Guard or troops of the Insurrection Act into this situation, it would no doubt inflame it further, and really, you suspect, not be good for Trump and the Republicans in the long term.
It's also interesting, isn't it? Because Minnesota is meant to be a swing state politically. Trump won it in 2016 very narrowly. He lost it in 2020, and he lost it again by a bigger margin in 2024, I believe, to Kamala Harris. So it's a rare example of a swing state that has become more anti-Trump by 2024. And that is interesting because we think of it now as this place of sort of democratic lunacy, but it is actually also a very conservative state.
Yeah, it's a very conservative state, and I think the Conservatives are just a little bit scared to pop their heads up at the moment. But I think it'll be a bellwether as well, because what is happening in that state is really happening around across the country. People are conservatives, and the all important independents. Maybe people are very unhappy with what is happening, and you need to look at probably Minnesota and extrapolate that a little bit more widely, which I think is what is happening in the White House and Congress at the moment. This cannot go on, basically.
And that's why you've got these independent voters seemingly turning on Trump, and you have this strange phenomenon of fierce Democrats, not all of them, Antifa members, though there is, of course, that, but strong Democrats who are conservative-minded, who want order on the streets, and who are appealing or thanking the Constitution for their right to bear arms and using it because they think this is what Americans should do. And so you have the left, or the liberal left, if you like, using the Second Amendment or appealing to the Second Amendment, which we usually, outsiders like Brits, think of as a very right-wing Republican thing.
Yeah, it's sort of, and again, that goes to the point that it's tying the Republican Party up in knots, where you've got the Democrats and the NRA who are in support of the victim in this latest case, which just makes everything much more fraught for trying to pick a path through this.
Ben Clerkin, stay warm in America this week,
Thank you.
And we'll catch up soon. All the best.
Cheers.